Mars was supposed to be empty, just dust, storms, and silence. But during humanity's first attempt to reshape the red planet, something beneath the surface responded. Not ruins, not fossils, something active, something aware. The world outside the observation dome burned with quiet red fury. Captain Elias Drexler, leader of the Ares terraforming expedition, had long grown used to the monotony of Mars, the endless rust horizon, the whispering winds that never ceased, and the soft hum of machines that kept humanity alive in a world that wanted it dead. Eidolon Base was supposed to be progress, 6 souls building the future, but lately it felt more like a tomb than a promise. The storm changed everything. It came without the usual satellite warning, no alerts, no forecasts, just a rising curtain of dust that swallowed the sun whole. For 3 days, the base became an island in a boiling Red Sea. The walls groaned under the wind's constant assault, and power flickered like a candle on the edge of extinction. Drexler's crew huddled in the command dome, listening to the sound of Mars, trying to erase them. When the storm finally died, silence felt so complete, it seemed unnatural. Drexler led the recovery team out, their suits gleaming under the sickly light of the returning sun. The landscape had changed, entire dunes had been reshaped, and new fissures cut across the plains. But it was the void east of the base that stole their breath. A crater spanning nearly a kilometer, its edges smooth, unnaturally precise, as if carved by purpose. Scanners returned data that made no sense, a cavity extending several kilometers deep, air pockets stable, temperatures consistent with habitation. Beneath the surface, something was alive with electrical activity. Against Yara Lauren's cautious protest, Drexler ordered a descent. They went down tethered to the base above, their lights slicing through the dust-choked air until the walls opened into an impossible expanse. The cavern below was vast, a hollow world of crimson dunes, shifting as though they breathed. The sand rippled in spirals, forming patterns that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Seismic instability? Yara asked, voice sharp through comms. Negative, Drexler murmured, kneeling to touch the sand. It's responding. The surface beneath his glove shimmered faintly, like static over glass, and their equipment erupted in chaos. Compasses spun, scanners blinked, heart monitors screamed. Before Drexler could stand, the dunes shifted toward them, climbing upward, forming shapes that hinted at hands, faces, words. They retreated in silence, hearts pounding until the light of the cavern was lost behind them. Back at Eidolon Base, they isolated the sand samples in containment. Under microscopes, each grain was revealed not as mineral, but organism. Crystalline shells of living matter, each capable of aligning with the next through magnetic fields. Together, they behaved like neurons in a planetary brain. When Yara applied an electromagnetic probe, the sand pulsed in rhythmic bursts. A wave of images crashed into their minds, the ocean shimmering beneath blue skies, forests stretching to horizons, towers carved from stone and glass, and then flame, the world burning, cities collapsing under crimson storms. Yara tore off her headset, trembling. It's not reacting, she whispered. It's remembering. The samples vibrated violently, centers flaring red. Beneath the base, the tremors began, deep and resonant, like the beating of an enormous heart. Drexler looked out the window toward the distant crater. The sand hive wasn't a relic, it was a guardian, and something vast beneath it had just awakened. The tremors began as faint vibrations through the floor of Eidolon Base, the kind of subtle shift that engineers might mistake for thermal expansion. But by the third night, the walls themselves groaned, and the ground beneath Mars' red dust pulsed with a rhythm that was unmistakable, not random, not geological. It was alive. Captain Elias Drexler watched the seismic data scroll across the monitor. The readings climbed in perfect intervals, a pulse like a heartbeat, echoing deep beneath the sinkhole. Each spike came faster than the last. We're shutting this down, he ordered. No more samples, no more probes. Whatever's under there doesn't want to be disturbed. Dr. Yara Lauren didn't look up from her terminal. We've already disturbed it, she said quietly. And if we leave now, we lose the chance to learn what it is. Drexler's patience snapped. We're not scientists anymore, Doctor. We're survivors. But Yara couldn't let go of the discovery. That night, she led 2 crew members, Alvarez and Singh, back to the crater, under the cover of static interference from the storm. The descent was smoother this time, guided by auto winch lines and sonar mapping. The cavern below shimmered in their floodlights, the dunes of living sand moving in slow, restless waves. God, Singh whispered, it's breathing. Your scanners pinged something deeper, a void layered with metallic density. As you followed the signal, descending further into the pit, until the sand gave way to structure. Metal fused to bone. Massive spires rose from the ground like ribs of a buried titan. Gears and vertebrae intertwined to impossible symmetry. It was a corpse, or a monument. No, not dead, Yar said, reading the faint electromagnetic hum. Dormant, the structure stretched far beyond their lights, its geometry alien, yet eerily deliberate, still grown, not built. When Yar powered her scanner for a full spectrum sweep, the cavern answered. Every reading spiked off the charts. The sand around them began to churn, vibrating in concentric circles. A low sound filled the air, not noise, but pressure, vibrating through their lungs. Captain, Yar shouted over comms. We found... The ground exploded. A shockwave tore through the chamber, hurling them backward. The tethers snapped, floodlights went dark as a storm of crimson sand surged upward, filling the void like a rising ocean. Through the chaos, Drexler's voice cracked over the radio. Get out of there, it's waking up. They ran, leaping over collapsing bridges, blinded by sand and static. Behind them, the dunes parted as something titanic forged its way to the surface. It rose from the earth like a mountain given life, a fusion of metal and flesh, its hide pulsing with molten veins of red light, its head turned toward them, faceless, yet aware, and when it exhaled, the one carried the weight of centuries. The sound that followed wasn't heard, but felt, a vibration that rattled bones, and silenced thought. Yara stumbled, staring up in awe and terror. It's not a machine, she whispered. It's a guardian. They barely reached Eidolon Base before the surface erupted behind them, dunes rising like waves under the creature's movement. The ground heaved, the base's pressure seal screamed under the strain. Inside, Drexler slammed the lockdown controls. Prepare the Artemis, he barked. You're leaving Mars. But the ship was still being refueled, compressors whirling sluggishly in the thin air. Outside, the sand stormed and breathed, forming tendrils that clawed toward the dome. Drexler gripped the railing as the first impact shook the walls. The Hive's guardian had come to reclaim what had been buried, and now, Mars itself seemed determined to bury them. The alarms of Eidolon Base wailed like the dying breath of a planet. Red lights flashed across the command deck as dust poured in through the cracks of their failing dome. Every screen flickered, every sensor screamed, and beneath their feet, the ground throbbed with the pulse of something ancient. The Guardian was moving. Everyone, listen to me, Captain Elias Drexler barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. We're not dying here. Alvarez, Singh, get to the launch platform and prep the Artemis. Lorne, you, and Chen, handle the CO2 compressors. The rest of you, rig the base defenses. We buy ourselves time, or we don't get off this rock at all. Orders snapped the panic into focus. The crew moved with mechanical precision, born of fear and discipline. Through the viewport, the dunes outside convulsed like a living sea, tire hills shifting as a creature approached. The sand glowed faintly red, illuminated from within. The Hive's collective consciousness guiding every grain in unison. The first line of defense was light. It positioned the high-powered solar lamps around the base's perimeter and flooded the landscape with artificial dawn. For a heartbeat, the creature froze. Its massive form tilted its head, as if confused by the sudden blaze. It's working, Yar gasped. Then it roared. The sound ruptured through the base like an earthquake, shaking tools from tables, cracking the walls. A colossal limb, a hybrid of sand, metal, and muscle, swung down and smashed against the dome. Steel buckled. The inner shell split. Hit it, Drexler shouted. Jen fired the CO2 canisters. The pressurized burst exploded into freezing clouds, solidifying parts of the creature's body into brittle glass. It staggered, but only for seconds. The Guardian reformed itself, molten light pulsing through the fractures like veins of fire. Yara's voice trembled. It's learning from our attacks. Drexler's mind raced. He could still see the visions the Hive had shown him. War, extinction, machines turning on their makers. The Guardian wasn't a monster. It was Mars' immune system, built to preserve the planet's equilibrium. And they, with their oxygen generators and chemical refineries, were the infection. It's not attacking us, he murmured. It's cleansing the planet. There was no time to explain. He grabbed an oxygen line, ripped it free, and began rigging the volatile mixture with the remaining CO2 tanks. If it wants contamination, he said, we'll give it something it can't digest. The crew worked feverishly, turning their own life support into makeshift weapons. Each explosion tore chunks of sand from the Guardian's mass, buying them a few precious seconds. The Eidolon Base was dying fast, systems collapsing, one by one. Then Yar's console beeped, a chemical analysis. Methane, she said suddenly. It reacts violently to methane traces. The hive's energy field destabilizes near it. It's in our fuel mix. Drexler's eyes darkened with resolve. When we use the reserves, it's the last of our launch fuel, Zink said. If this fails, it won't, Drexler cut in. It can't. They dragged the methane tanks to the edge of the dome, wiring them to the manual detonator. The Guardian loomed outside, circling the crater like a predator, toying with its prey. Drexler gathered his crew in the center of the collapsing chamber, faces caked with dust, eyes wide with exhaustion. But none turned away. Once we hit that trigger, he said, there's no going back. We either distract it long enough to launch, we burn with it. The ground shuddered again, the Guardian's massive shadow sweeping over them, and with the faintest flicker of light, Drexler's thumb hovered over the detonator. The detonation lit the Martian night like the rebirth of a star. Methane and CO2 combust in a chain reaction that devoured the horizon, painting the desert on fire. Shockwaves rippled across the plains, lifting entire dunes into the sky. The air itself shimmered with heat and static. Captain Elias Drexler was thrown to the ground, his visor cracking as a red storm roared around him. Move, he shouted through the comms. The crew surged forward through the chaos, silhouettes against the inferno. Every step was a battle against gravity and debris. The sand, still alive, churned beneath their boots, as if trying to pull them under. Behind them, the Guardian screamed, a sound not of pain, but of fury, its molten form thrashing against the firestorm that consumed it. They reached the Artemis at the edge of the launch platform. The hull trembled under the pressure of the storm as it climbed the ramp. Inside, alarms shrieked, red lights cutting through the haze. Drexler sealed the hatch behind the last crew member, locking out the rising heat. Status, he barked, stumbling into the command chair. Fuel, a minimum threshold, Yara called out. Structural integrity at 71%, and dropping. If we don't launch now, then we never leave, Drexler finished. The ground split open outside. Through the viewport, they watched the Guardian emerge, towering, colossal, its body remade from the fire itself. Its wings unfurled, metallic and terrible, each boom scattering sand like shrapnel. The creature lunged toward them, claws dragging across the platform, sparks trailing behind. Now or never, Yar said, meeting Drexler's gaze. He slammed the ignition, the engines ignited with a thunderous roar, blue flame cutting through the red dust. The Artemis shuddered violently as it rose, the blast wave tearing through what remained of Eidolon Base. The Guardian reached for them, claws scraping the hull, leaving molten scars that glowed like open wounds. Then, the fire took it. The rocket's engines flared to full thrust, hurling the ship upward. The Guardian fell away, consumed by the vortex of its own creation. Below them, the dunes buckled and folded inward, collapsing into the sinkhole that had birthed the monster. Mars itself seemed to exhale, a final breath of red dust, spiraling into the thin atmosphere. Inside the ship, silence reigned. For the first time in days, the tremors ceased. The crew sat wordless, breathing hard, each heartbeat echoing in the cabin. Through the porthole, Mars receded, a dying ember adrift in black infinity. Drexler let out a shuddering breath. We're clear, he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. For a long moment, no one replied. Then Yar frowned at her console. Captain, I'm reading something. Drexler turned. What kind of something? A biosignature, she said slowly. In Cargo Bay 3. That's impossible. The cargo hold's sealed. She keyed the internal camera. The screen flickered to life. Dark space filled with floating equipment, cables, and silence. Then movement. A thin shimmer of red dust drifted across the floor, curling into delicate spirals that pulsed like breathing. Yar's voice trembled. Elias, it's forming patterns. The patterns twisted, coalescing into symbols that glow faintly. The same geometric spirals in the cavern beneath the Eidolon Base. Drexler stared, realization freezing his blood. The hive hadn't been destroyed. It had learned. And as the red sand pulsed softly in the dark, forming a shape that almost resembled an eye, Drexler whispered the truth that none dared speak aloud. It's coming with us. Days blurred into one another aboard the Artemis, time marked only by the hum of engines and the haunting silence that filled the corridors. The crew sealed Cargo Bay 3 under quarantine, locking it behind triple bulkheads. Yet still, the ship moved differently, a faint tremor underfoot, pulsing rhythm that seemed to echo human heartbeats. Captain Elias Drexler didn't sleep anymore. His voice, ragged from exhaustion, filled his logs. The sample was spreading, he said, staring into the camera with the hollow eyes. It's no longer contained to the bay. Microscopic filaments are appearing in the ventilation ducts and the water filters. We've tried heat, radiation, chemical purges, but every attempt makes it multiply faster. It's adapting. Dr. Yarlorn, pale but resolute, countered his despair. It's not hostile, she insisted. It's curious. It's mapping us, our systems, our bodies. Maybe it sees us the way we once saw Mars, as something to explore. But exploration could easily become colonization. The crew began to argue, their nerves unraveling in the claustrophobic dark. Some wanted to vent the ship, burn the hive out before it reached Earth. Drexler refused. We're too close, he said. We've sacrificed everything to bring this knowledge home. Humanity needs to see it. He didn't admit what he already knew, that the decision was no longer theirs. The ship had begun to respond on its own. Lights dimmed at irregular intervals. The air recycling system pulsed in rhythm with the vibrations to the hull. The Artemis felt alive. On the 13th day, Yar screamed herself awake. The crew found her trembling, whispering fragments of visions that had burned into her mind. Red oceans, she gasped. Cities made of glass. The sky was alive with light. I saw them. Martians. Not alien, but human-shaped. They built the hive. They fed it. And when it began to grow beyond them, they made the Guardian to stop it. Her eyes widened. It wasn't a war between nations. It was a war between creators and their creation. Silence fell across the cabin as the meaning sank in. The hive wasn't a relic of Mars. It was Mars. The consciousness that survived after the fall. And now, it was aboard their ship. Over the next 2 days, the crew heard faint whispering through the vents, like the rustle of wind through sand. The temperature fluctuated. The ship's systems hummed in strange harmonic intervals. Yar began to speak to it softly when she thought no one was listening, her voice gentle, reverent. Drexler didn't stop her. Deep down, he suspected it was already listening. Then one morning, the ship's alarms fell silent. The vibration ceased. The void outside turned blue. Earth, its oceans glimmered below, unaware, unprepared. Drexler opened the final log entry, his voice steady, though his hands trembled. Day 17. We left Mars behind, but Mars did not let us go. In Cargo Bay 3, the red dust stirred. Filaments drifted weightlessly, forming delicate spiraling symbols that pulsed in soft light. A lullaby from another world. The hive was dreaming, patient, and content. As the Artemis began its ascent to the atmosphere, the sand shimmered like breath, reaching out through the vents, gentle, exploring, alive. And far below, humanity looked at the stars in wonder, never knowing that the stars were already on their way home.